This is the recorded portion of the lecture for Chapter 20. As we talked about in class today, ecosystems have both living things that are portions of them, and we call these living things the biotic components, and things that are non-living, which are the abiotic components. Our biotic components are things that are alive or that have been alive. The abiotic are things that are not and cannot be living. So abiotic would include soil and water and clouds, rock types, whereas biotic would include the plants, the animals, the bacteria, and even the decaying items in the habitat. We also talked about autotrophs and the fact that they are producers within the ecosystem. And we talked about the different types of roles that organisms have in the ecosystem. If they are not a producer or an autotroph, they are a heterotroph, or they're a detritivore. And we have the heterotrophs and the different types listed here. And the decomposers are our last type of group. We also talked about how energy flows through an ecosystem while chemicals cycle. And remember that ecosystems are constantly going to be dependent upon an outside source of energy entering into the system because energy is flowing through, whereas chemical components are recycled so they can be reused time and time and time again. We also talked about the difference between a food web and a food chain, dealing that one is showing you a single energy flow path, where the other is looking at the entire flow of energy and nutrients through the ecosystem. And that trophic levels are the levels on which an organism eats in a community. So everything that is an herbivore is going to be on one level. Then your predators are going to be on different levels. This was an example of a food chain, whereas this is an example of a food web. And this is another example of a food web. You look today at different biomes, and I'm going to give you then an overview of these biomes. For a few of these, I may give you information that I'll say could be on exam 3. If I say that, it is likely an item that will be on exam 3. I mentioned that climate is dictated by temperature and rainfall. The amount of rain an area gets, its average temperature, its temperature highs, its temperature lows, those are going to determine what types of animals and plants are capable of living and thriving there. So climate is going to determine where ecosystems are found, and we'll see that different climates relate to different ecosystems. The climates that are in areas where they are very dry are going to be more like desert climates. The climates where we have a lot of wet rain are going to lead to the development of rainforest ecosystems. The next slide is going to show you that we can generalize what types of biomes are found where, but it's important to note that ecosystems do not have these hard and fast edges. In fact, they gradually change from one type to another. Each of these ecosystems is going to have inputs from and outputs to other ecosystems in the biosphere. Things on the land are going to affect the ocean, things in the water are going to affect what's on land, and so forth. And then we have the definition of a biome here on this slide. This is showing you where the different types of biomes are found. We're going to focus on covering most, but probably not all of these in this lecture. And the first type of biome that we're going to deal with is the tropical rainforest. This is showing you part of a tropical rainforest area near the Amazon in Peru. Our tropical rainforests are biomes that are found in areas that are warm and have lots of rainfall. These are found in places like South America, Africa, the Indo-Malayan region. They're frequently found near the equator. Their temperature is warm year-round, and rainfall is plentiful, about 2 meters of rainfall a year. That's a lot of rain. 2 meters of rainfall would be about 6 feet of rainfall each year. This is considered to be probably the richest ecosystem of all of, especially the land-based ecosystems. And something you should definitely know for exam 3 is that this is a rich ecosystem with an enormous diversity of species. There are many, many different types of species found here. The rainforest structure is really different than a lot of the other types of ecosystems. It has a very complex structure with life taking part at various different heights above the ground. So there's many levels of life. There's some occurring on the forest floor, some in the understory, which is going to be the middle of where the trees are, and then some at the top of the trees in the canopy section. And surprisingly, we find that most of the animals living in a tropical rainforest are not found on the ground, but most of them are found living within the trees and the canopy. There are more insects here probably than anywhere else in the world. And we have barely even scratched the surface of the different types of insect species that can be found here. This is showing you the different levels of life in a rainforest. You can see we have the forest floor, the canopy, and in between we have what live in the understory. Even the types of plants are going to vary from one level to another. At the bottom, on the forest floor, you're going to find a lot of ferns. Higher up, you're going to find epiphytes, which are air plants. They're not really going to have roots, as we're used to thinking of roots. And lianas, or different types of vines, are going to become plentiful as you move up in the height of the forest. And the types of organisms found here are very different than found elsewhere. Macaws are native here, as are things like this cone-headed katydid, which looks a little scary for an insect, truthfully. The ocelot is found living in these forests, as are poison dart frogs and lots of beautiful butterfly species. And then lemurs and many species of lizards and frogs make the rainforest their home. Our next ecosystem that we're going to talk about is the savanna ecosystem. As you can read on the slide, savannas are dominated by grasses and woodlands, and what you'll find is that savannas do have trees, but these trees are going to be in small groups of trees or stands with lots of grassland areas in between. Savannas are found in climates where there is a cool, dry season and a hot, rainy season. So this difference in seasonality dealing with both temperature and rain is very important. The largest of the savannas are found in Africa, with other savanna habitats in Australia, Southeast Asia, and South America. You probably should know where the largest of the savanna habitats is found for exam. Savannas themselves are characterized by, as I mentioned on the last slide, areas of lots of grass with sparse populations or sparse stands of trees. The plants that live here have very deep root systems because sometimes fire becomes common here, as does drought. Drought during the cool, dry season is normal. By having deep roots, these plants are able to access water that is underground and very deep. And by accessing it, they can survive both drought and fire. The African savanna, while very different than the tropical rainforest, actually supports the greatest variety and number of large herbivores of all biomes. This includes elephants and giraffes, and antelopes, zebras, wildebeests, water buffalo, rhinoceroses, species like that. The largest of our herbivores are found in the greatest variety in Africa, living on the savannas. There are no animals like this living in the tropical rainforests. This gives you an idea of what life on a savanna may look like. You can see there are some trees in the background, but lots of grass and many different types of large herbivores. The map that is inset here shows in purple where the savannas are found. Our next ecosystem type are deserts. This is some pictures from Texas. And you can see here a type of cactus, the ocotillo. Deserts tend to be found at 30 degrees north and south. So 30 degrees in the northern hemisphere and 30 degrees in the southern hemisphere. They are areas that are dry. That is their defining characteristic. They receive less than 25 centimeters of rainfall a year. That's less than 10 inches of rainfall a year. The winds that come through this area may be plentiful, but they are in fact dry winds. And in the desert, one of the things that is most shocking is that there's a lack of cloud cover. It's very sunny, it's very hot, it's very dry. And one of the reasons that it becomes quite dry is that the lack of cloud cover allows the sun's rays to penetrate easily, making it dry and warm. At night, however, there's also no cloud cover. And what happens then is that the nights become very cold because the clouds keep the heat from the day closer to the ground, which means that we find in the deserts there are very hot days and very cold nights with a large extreme difference in temperature. The plants that are found here include cacti and a few other types of plants that are adapted to surviving drought, heat, and cold. They may not have leaves, they may instead have needles. They may have ways of storing moisture and water year-round within their bodies. The animals that live here are very well adapted to desert life. They may not need much water. In fact, some of them may need almost no water at all. They will dig burrows to get out of the heat of the day. They may, like the squirrels that are found in deserts, have a large tail that they use as a way of shading themselves. Most animals in the desert are nocturnal or burrowing and have some form of a protective body covering. If they're nocturnal, they're out when it's colder, they're going to lose less water to sweating. If they burrow, they're burrowing under the ground surface where the temperature is more constant, and they're less likely to become dehydrated there as well. The body coverings can help them from becoming dehydrated too. This would be true of snakes and things that are covered with scales. There are a lot of different types of insects found in the desert, and many of them are going to pass through their life stages when it is raining or just after a rainfall. This is showing you the type of vegetation that's common in a desert area. And this is the chaparral, which we are not actually going to talk about for a lecture. We're going to move on to the temperate grasslands, of which the American prairies are a great example. And you can see that this is a habitat that does have a large herbivore. However, the variety found here is going to be much less than what we found on the savannas. The temperate grasslands include the Russian steppes, the South American pampas, and the North American prairies. They are characterized by cold winters and hot, dry summers. This is very different from the last couple ecosystems we've looked at. The climate here is different. The areas with tall grass prairies require more rainfall than those with short grass prairies. So we find that where the grasslands exist next to a desert, they're going to be the short grass variety, and that the taller grass variety are going to be found next to a forested area. There are lots of animals that live on and in the temperate grasslands. There are many different types of mammals, such as mice, prairie dogs, rabbits in the United States. They tend to live below ground, but they are going to come up above ground to do their feeding. So they'll come up either at night or for small runs during the day. There are large herds of bison and other large herbivores that will also roam these areas, like pronghorn antelope, but they will not be as plentiful as the animals were on the savannas. We find that in a lot of places we have converted the grasslands into agricultural areas. The soil that is rich and plentiful for growing grasses is also ideal for doing agriculture. And this is showing you the temperate grassland again with lots of bison, 3 bison in this picture. Our next habitat type are the temperate deciduous forests. These are the ones you may be perhaps the most familiar with because this is the type of biome that eastern is found in. I would in fact know what type of biome eastern is found in, the temperate deciduous forests. And these are found in North America, Eastern Asia, and much of Europe. They're found just south of the taiga, or the boreal forests. The climate found here is kind of moderate. We have times of cold and warm. We have seasons. We have relatively high rainfall. Our seasons are very well defined. We have a winter, spring, summer, fall, each with different types of temperature regimes. Our trees are large-leafed. The idea of broadleaf is we have rather large leaves, and they're deciduous, meaning that they lose their leaves every year in the fall, and they regrow new leaves again in the spring. So these are not going to be your pine trees. These are instead going to be your oaks, your beech, your sycamores, your maples, trees like those. Within the temperate deciduous forest, the tallest trees will form a canopy, but unlike the tropical rainforest, we won't have a large understory of trees to live inside of. You have the canopy, and then you're going to have a smaller understory set of trees, and then the forest floor. While there is some stratification here that does allow habitats for insects and birds, there's not nearly as much as you find in a tropical rainforest. In this habitat, what allows many animals to live year-round are the fruits, nuts, and berries that exist in the fall months that they're able to stock up and keep for winter food supplies. One of the things that can be found in these habitats is a wolf. Our next habitat type is the boreal forest, or the taiga. These are often called coniferous forests. These are forests where pine trees and other trees with needles as opposed to leaves are going to be your dominant tree type. The taiga is found in the northern part of North America and Eurasia. It's found near mountaintops as well, and it exists along the Pacific coast of North America down through Northern California. It covers about 11% of the Earth's landmass, and one of the subtypes of this type of biome is the temperate rainforest, which is found on the west coast of Canada and the United States. We see that there's lots of rain in the temperate rainforests. There may not be as much rain in the rest of the boreal forests, but some of the tallest trees in the world can be found in these habitats. And this shows you what one of these ecosystems might look like, and one of the animals that is quite common here. We have a moose. Our last land biome type would be that of the tundra. During the summer and spring, the tundra may look like this picture here, but for the majority of the year, it's going to be cold and snowy because the tundra biome type is found just south of the polar seas in the northern hemisphere, so just below the Arctic. It covers about 20% of the Earth's landmass. The majority of the year, the tundra is cold and dark. The winters are long, cold, and dark. They're harsh winters, very strong winds, lots of snow, freezing temperatures. The summer, on the other hand, is sunny and warm, but short, about 6 to 8 weeks in length. Rainfall here is that of approximately a desert, about 20 centimeters a year. But because it is so cold, this isn't quite exactly the same type of desert habitat. And in this area, it is so cold that quite a bit of the ground surface stays frozen all year. The portions that remain fully frozen are called the permafrost. It's only the top few inches of soil that really thaw during the summertime. There may not be many trees in this area, but there will be lots of shrubs and grasses and other types of flowering plants. The growing season here is too short for trees to survive well because there's only a few weeks to make up the growing season. So their roots are not capable of storing enough food because they can't go deep enough. The roots can't go through the permafrost and the growing season is too short, so you will not find trees often in the tundra habitat. This shows you what the tundra may look like towards the beginning of its fall season. And these are the types of animals that can be found living in the tundra. In chapter 19, we will talk about the lynx and the snowshoe hare. Now I'm going to move on to aquatic ecosystems and marine ecosystems for a moment. Those biomes that are found in freshwater and saltwater. So starting with the freshwater, our habitats that we could start with include rivers, which have a variety of different types. Some will be small and there'll be more streams. Others will be wide, some are deep, others will have lots of rocks and rapids in them.